Hello, everyone. Welcome to this talk. Today with me is Katie Fenn, and together we're going to talk a little bit about the less technical parts of career development. And Katie is someone with quite a remarkable career so far, and we're going to have her share some of the experiences and hopefully some of the things that she's going to say are going to be useful to you. Hello, Katie, welcome. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, like for people who don't know you, stuff like you would say at the first date.
So I am a software developer. I've been working in the industry for about 15 years. I specialize in front end, but my experience covers the full stack as well, from databases through the back end up to front end code and CSS. I've worked for a number of companies. The ones that you've probably heard of are Canonical, who make the Ubuntu operating system, and NPM, who developed the JavaScript package manager for Node.js and for use in the browser as well.
So in my opinion, there are two paths. You can be a corporate person, you integrate with the team, you go up into the ladder of the company, or you can go on your own, either consultant, so sole trader of a sort, or you make your own business. You've chosen, so far I understand, the corporate path. How has been that working for you?
I really enjoy it. I like working for companies. I like being part of something that's bigger than me. And I really enjoy working with teams of people. I think that human beings are very social animals, and that when you're working with a team of people, you can achieve much more than what you could on your own. That's a personal preference. I'm really looking forward, maybe someday in the future, to being on the other side of the fence. But working for a company allows you to tackle a lot of the really big problems. So working at NPM, you can work on a crucial piece of internet infrastructure. When I was working at Canonical, you can build a really huge developer ecosystem that is very much a huge part of open source software, and it allows you access to solving the really big problems. You can occasionally do that as a sole trader, as an independent contractor, but I think initially, after graduating from university and making your way into the industry, probably working for a company is the fastest route to that. So it's a good way of doing that. It also brings a lot of job security as well. Job security is enormously important to me, and working for a big company often brings an awful lot more job security than working on your own.
Yeah, well, we don't have the type of security seen in the movies. Young man starts at a factory, and 6 years later they give him a golden watch and with the thanks. So that sort of thing, at least in the IT, I don't think it's really there. But compared to the fabled feast or famine cycle that happens for contractors or freelancers, relatively speaking, there's a lot more of that.
Yeah, of course. I listened to several really, really good podcasts. One of the podcasts that I listened to is called the Accidental Tech Podcast, which is more about the Apple ecosystem. And they discuss going independent quite a lot, because one of their presenters made the transition over from being a salaried, permanently employed worker over to being an independent worker. And one of the frequent things that they talked about was job security is a lie. Like, you never have absolute cast iron job security ever. Everything is relative, but generally speaking, when you're working for a bigger company, it's slightly more there than when you're working independently.
From this point of view, what is your take on a corporate career developer building up a personal brand, a way to differentiate themselves from other people? What's your take on the way they can enhance their chances of being a successful developer?
Anything that looks good on your CV, really. Anything that gets you noticed, something that indicates that you have influence on other people, that you've put your views, your experience on the line, made it visible to other people, and other people have gone, yes, I agree with that. It gets you a foot in the door. It gets you past the initial screening process when you're being employed. If the recruitment manager can say, "Oh, this is Katie. She looks like she knows her stuff because she's been on stage and talked about it, and everyone else has enjoyed her talk." That's pretty much it at the end. I think personal brand is not as important when you're working for a big company, because you're not having to sell yourself and sell your professional services like every 6 months while you're chasing a new contract. You can afford to just build up a reputation over the course of a few years, because hopefully, if things are going well, you're only going to be looking for a job every 2 or 3 years. That said, it is really well worth doing it, because it gives you authenticity. It gives you it gains you a lot of respect from people. It gets you further in the recruitment process, and it gets you contacts as well. When you go to a conference or when you write a blog, it gets you noticed, and you get introduced to people who can potentially get you new jobs. That's originally one of the reasons that I started speaking in the first place, is that when I have found myself out of work, it's been a really, really useful way of finding new work.
So this episode, with your first speaking event, can you tell us a bit more details about it, please?
So I originally got involved in the local community here in Sheffield in the north of England through a meetup called Geek Up. It was a general meetup, so you could talk about anything. You could talk about PHP, you could talk about Ruby, you could talk about Python, you could talk about Minecraft, in fact, and computer games. So you could talk about anything you want. And after visiting my first Geek Up and watching talks, it looked like quite a fun thing to do. And my good friend Liam Jolly, who I went to university in Sheffield with, said, "Hey, this looks like a lot of fun. We should really do this." I was a bit skeptical, but I took part. We did a joint talk and really enjoyed it. And about 6 months later, I was made redundant from my first job in the industry outside of university. This was a stage in my life where my income was the only income for my household. My partner was in full-time education, and I was earning significantly underneath the average wage for the UK. So losing my job at that point made my living position, made my quality of living precarious. So it was a very, very serious and stressful time. And I decided to go on to Twitter and just broadcast that I was losing my job and that I needed to find a new job really quickly. This was picked up and retweeted by all the contacts that I made through GeekUp and through my local community. And I had an interview within a week. And by the time that I'd worked out my notice at the job that was laying me off, I would be walking straight into a new job. So for me, engaging in the community and putting myself out there, so to speak, has been a really, really, really big lesson in being resourceful and meeting lots of contacts and always having options. At the end of the day, engaging in the community gives you lots of options. And since then, I've just kept on going. I've tried to keep it up, and it's just opened more and more doors for me. So that's why I keep on doing it.
Okay, backtracking a little bit. When did you start creating content, and how did you do it first? Was it during your first job? Was it after you started attending this meetup? And what's your preferred way of expressing yourself? Writing, video, audio, anything else? I don't know, photography.
I don't think I actually had a choice at first, because my friend just said we should do a talk, and I said, okay. I felt kind of dragged into it, and I felt very intimidated at first, but it was really fun afterwards. And when people come up to you and say that they really appreciated the talk you did, you get a huge buzz out of it. I've tried through the years to also do blog post writing and writing for publications such as NetMag, and I enjoy doing that, but there's something about being on stage and having the showmanship and the interaction with the audience that is just an awful lot of fun. And being involved with events as well and getting to meet loads of people is something that writing doesn't produce that much of an instant hit. But it is very creative, and it is very fun to do if you have some spare time. So conference talks is how I very much like to do it. I also like designing all the slides as well and improving my skills with PowerPoint. A lot of speakers will say, I write the content first, or I write the slides first. I go straight into the slides because I'm a very visual person. So it's fun from that respect as well.
Okay. Do you have a personal website? And when did you start it, and what sort of things we can find there?
So I have a blog. It doesn't have much on it. It has occasional writings. It has occasional articles in it, but they're kind of few and far between. It's very much there just as a placeholder for me on the internet. It's www.katiefenn.co.uk. It's changed regularly through the years, but the hook, the creative design for it has remained very much the same, and that is when you visit it in a desktop browser, there's a little space shuttle which launches on the left-hand side when you scroll down the page.
Are you active on social media much?
I am. I occasionally protect the tweets on my account, but normally it is open. But I don't put a lot of effort into branding my social media. I feel very strongly that my social account is for me personally as well as professionally. So it's relatively unfiltered, and it consists of my opinions as well, my opinions in my personal life as well as professionally. And I value Twitter accounts that are more like that. Other people have different opinions and reserve their main account for more professional views and interactions. That's fine. That might be something that people would like to do. But personally, my Twitter account is probably older than my actual career. So it's always been personal from the very start.
Yeah, I personally think myself as well that authenticity is the key, because otherwise it can move things into a mask, and masks shatter very easy today, and once you're perceived as unauthentic and just uh, fake, yeah, fake is a good is a good word for this one. It's better to just have everything. This is me. This is how I work. If we found common ground, we'll gladly work together. If not,
Um, I would agree that personally, as far as my own social media accounts goes, I do think it's authentic for me to be personal on my Twitter account. That might not be the same way, particularly if you have a very carefully curated personality and brand as a consultant, for example. You might want to be different, but everyone is different. That's the whole point. This is one of the reasons why we're recording this podcast. Different strokes for different folks. Everyone is different, and people might want to do it separately. What works for me is to be genuine and true to myself on my Twitter feed, so I'm more unfiltered.
okay, I'm going to move the talk to like the next part, and I'm going to ask you if you have a mentor or a role model in the professional field. Who are they and how they influenced you?
I have a lot of people that I really, really look up to. Um, uh, a few of which include my former managers, managers and colleagues at NPM, including Raquel Velez, who was the engineering manager for NPM and its first full-time employee, I believe. She's wonderful. She is a truly competent and personable manager. I'd like to call her a friend as well. Jeff is also one of the Jeff Lembeck is also used to be my manager. We started working out as colleagues, and he started off as a web developer for NPM working on the website. He later became my manager, and we kept a really good friendly relationship going through that. Also, people that you can speak to and level to and talk about your insecurities to as well. Really, really pleasant folks that I look up to an awful lot. Other people outside of the industry that I really, really look up to. I'm a huge space fan, and I love anything to do with space and anything to do with the Apollo missions or the space shuttle. If you've seen the film Apollo 13, you'll have seen the mission controllers, the people who are at the desks, who are troubleshooting problems in an emergency after the Apollo 13 spacecraft has ended up in a deeply serious emergency situation. And I really, really look up to people like that, people who are working through an engineering problem but can also see the bigger picture as well, who aren't just focusing in on the details but can think about what they do, how that affects other people, how that affects lives that are on the line. I look up to people like that. So people like John Aaron, who's portrayed in the film as being one of the people who saves the mission by by restoring power to the spacecraft and figuring out how to do that in a safe way. So I'm an engineer at heart. I really appreciate people who can think outside the box and be creative and see the bigger picture as well. So NASA mission controllers too.
What's your vision for your career path in the future? What do you see yourself, I don't know, in 5 years, 10 years?
I see myself in 5 to 10 years' time still being an engineer. Creativity is a huge part of being an engineer for me. Coming up with creative solutions to fix a problem or to make something work faster. I don't want to be too far away from the code face. I don't want to be too far away from problem solving. That sort of work really makes my brain tick. I've tried dabbling with line management in the past. I can do that, but being away from the code for too long removes my joy for the job. So I can't see myself going really high up the corporate ladder anymore. But that's okay, because I have a lot of ways to build my influence in the industry, to learn lots of new things, to do lots of conference talks to increase my influence and to build my brand, but also try out lots of new things as well, such as creating and running or co-organizing, I should say, with lots of really good friends, Front End North, our conference in Sheffield. Doing those things can build your influence and to build your network hugely without having to go really high up the corporate ladder. So more organizing, more involvement in the community, lots more experience with different technologies, but always an engineer.
Do you have any advice for people who are just starting as a developer?
There's an awful lot of ways that you can get involved with the community, and I thoroughly recommend getting involved with your local community. So the first and most obvious ways is to attend your local tech meetups, get to know people, go and watch talks, go and socialize afterwards, and if you can, get involved with them. I would suggest that everyone try speaking and doing one talk once to see if you like it or not. Sometimes people do like it and really enjoy it, and sometimes people don't. But I think trying out is something that's well worth doing. And if speaking isn't your thing, maybe writing a blog post is good, or just collecting lots of tips on Twitter and becoming known as someone who can advise on something. That's one thing that you can do as well. You could try starting a YouTube channel or being a streamer on Twitch and streaming your development process and things that you're working on. You can get involved in open source and contribute just your code. You can test other people's code. You can help manage projects on GitHub. There are now so many ways of getting involved in either your local community or the global community. And I would suggest anyone who's coming into the industry, just meet up with people, find out who's out there, connect with other people. The community is an incredibly powerful ally when you're looking for work, when you are having problems at work and you need advice. There's help out there, and the community can be a wonderful place to find people who can help.
Yeah, indeed, it's so much easy to get help, feedback, and support from others. But there's also, the reverse of the coin. Coming online gets you exposed to negativity, to trolls, to haters. Any advice on dealing with this sort of negativity?
My advice is that you don't owe anyone anything. And it's really important at the end of the day to remember that you get out of the community exactly what you put in, but you don't owe them anything at the end of the day. You can choose to back out and reclaim your time when you like. It will still be there later on, and anyone who is there expecting you to work on something, expecting you to merge a pull request in an open source project, anyone who has a problem with your conference talk, they are not entitled to your time at the end of the day. And if you've put in, as long as you put in the effort that you think you can, then that is worth your time at the end of the day. It is your time that you are donating. So if you need to back out, you can. I remember my first open source project. It was called Parker. It's like a CSS linter. It gathers stats on your CSS, and it gives you numbers like the number of selectors, for instance. After I initially published it, I got an issue opened where someone disputed the way that specificity is measured, that the way that Parker was measuring it was fundamentally wrong. I think they even bolded that in the issue. And it just made me feel really, really kind of depressed. It made me feel anxious that I'd put myself out there and I'd been wrong. But really, that really wasn't the case at all. That I was following a lot of guidelines and documentation at the time, and that there was a good reason for Parker measuring specificity in that way. Exploring, it made me explore different ways that I could measure specificity in the future, and that was fine. A lot of people are just out there just to make you waste your time, and this person was one of them. And they probably hadn't ever created a conference talk, they probably hadn't ever been on a podcast, they probably had not ever published their own open source project. Those people are soul-sucking leeches, and they do not deserve your time at all.
Yeah, it's in the end, time is the one resource that we can't get more of it, so it's even more important. Okay, I have now for you, so that we just get to know you a little better, I had a rapid fire set of questions. And let's see what your take. I think I know already the answer to the first one, so it's tea or coffee?
Tea. I like tea.
Obviously, tea, you're British. So, yeah, that's the sort of thing that I'm going to ask. So,
and specifically Yorkshire Gold tea. It's the best tea in the world.
I wouldn't know it. I don't think I had it. So, let's start with the rapid fire. Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Voice call or text message?
Text message.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Oh, Star Trek. I'm a huge Star Trek fan.
Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
Oh, that's a tough one. I've read both of them. Harry Potter.
Pepsi or Coca-Cola?
Pepsi Max.
Mac or PC?
Mac.
Mac. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Yes.
Okay. Now, thank you so much for agreeing to share your time and your experiences. And I don't know, any last advice you would have, or anything else you would like to add now?
I'm just going to say, just get involved with your local community in any way. It's been tremendously good for me. It's really helped dig me out of some desperate situations in the past. Making connections who can find you work when you need it the most, and can help you find better work when you are underemployed or when you're working for an exploitative employer, it's a really, really good way of digging yourself out of some really awful situations and finding yourself a better job. It's invaluable.
Cool. Thank you so much again. And hopefully we'll get to partake from your experience at some other time in the future.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.